Yeah, welcome everyone. This is the summit about your true nature, peace, and freedom. And I have Karen McPhee right here. Welcome, Karen.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you have had many realizations about your true nature or about your whole self. You've had a series of spontaneous realizations, and you've also had some deep inquiry into the nature of suffering. And that has kind of diluted your ego or your separate self, you could say, and into this wholeness, this oneness with everything, the true nature of you. And so that's what we'll be speaking about today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you tell me a little bit about what it is to be the true nature? We all hear it's peace and it's freedom. And so, what does that mean?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because each one of us will express it uniquely based on, there's some general universal things for sure. But the way I would describe it right now is very different than I would have 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And that is, first of all, of course, it's peace and freedom. It's to go beyond that collapsed, small, limited sense of self and access, come to know, and then realize you are a larger self. And it is when we connect with the consciousness or awareness or presence that we become more aware of that expanded self that is always present and free and peaceful, always, always here or always that. And for me, that's sort of the first awakening to consciousness. Yet I would say that that isn't the full picture, because even once we've realized the freedom in, let's say, the consciousness, the body will still have in it the memory, the energy, the contractions of being a separate self. Whereas when we recognize the expanded self, it's also unity consciousness. It's our oneness with source, which we are, of course, but also with all. But for me, it isn't complete until it comes back into oneness inside. So to also help to release the restrictions from our embodiment until that consciousness, that sense of freedom merges more fully with our actual physical, emotional, mental embodiment structure and expression. And that part is ongoing. It's still deepening. I don't know that there's an end to it as long as we're still in the body, but it's increasing experience of freedom and peace, even in our moment to moment experience.
So, when you are living like that, it seems like you say there's a deepening or it's a never ending process. So, we never actually finish. There's not a goal or an end to the journey.
Oh, that's such a great question or inquiry. Well, what has been my sort of guiding, um, almost like a mantra, really, with this that just spontaneously arose and is just continuing to deepen in me is a quote from the great Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it encompasses the whole thing. First part, he said, the investigation into what we are not, so in other words, the false self, the limited self, that investigation is finite. It comes to an end. There is a moment when you absolutely know you are not this body mind, you are not the self image, you are something greater. And it is absolute. There's no turning back from it. It is the end. And so I've added my own text in there. So his quote was, the investigation into who you are not is finite. However, he said, and this is what I'm pointing to now, the exploration of what you are is infinite because what you are is infinite. And so that's more what I'm pointing to here. So, yes, true awakening and realization of true nature. The first part is for me a prerequisite. It's oftentimes referred to as awakening, and it's sometimes there's a reference to three awakenings: the awakening of the head, the heart, and the gut. So the first part for me is, it doesn't always work in that order, but it's the head awakening in consciousness awareness. I'm not just this body. And that's what Nisargadatta is talking about. You see it, you're not the self-image, you're not the I thought. It's like, that's it.
Yeah.
It's done. But a lot of teachings and teachers that I was exposed to after that realization happened spontaneously for me. I hadn't really come across a good description of it, or anyone that I knew of who was truly living in that as yet when it happened. And as I started to explore, a lot of the teachings I found just only took us that far, and that's great because we need that, and that's what they're useful for. So for myself, I was exploring, and when I came to that quote by Nisargadatta, it really described it. So yes, it's not that there's even, I would say, a process. It's just a natural, organic deepening that keeps happening.
And it happens on its own. We don't have to do anything about it.
No. I mean, the only thing I would add, because it's not absolute, there's no rules, everyone's unique, their unfoldment is unique. There are times when there may be periods of where a very strong intention arises. And again, it makes it sound like I'm having an intention as a person. No, that's not it. It's like you're saying, everything actually is grace. Grace is what gives us the interest in the first place. Grace is what brings us to seeing through the limited self. And grace does this ever deepening. And sometimes how grace operates is suddenly there's an intention or a focus, and it may be, and I've had this happen for me, suddenly there's a real focus on any remaining fear patterns being dissolved, or perhaps you're going along for months or years and everything is smooth, and suddenly something gets disturbed in the outer, and oh look, there's a residue of something here because there's a response or reaction, and then there's a focus. But as you say, it's nobody's doing that. There's no like separate self driving this. It just happens. Consciousness or grace itself, awareness, it's producing the whole unfoldment. But it gets ever more stable, rooted, whole, and it includes more and more and more of what we are. But for me, it's always in the body. It's grounded. It's here.
So you feel like you're very much in your body, but the awareness is also like you said, it's not really the body mind. Awareness is there's no separate. So, but it still
Yes.
feels like it's in the body too.
Yeah, it's a paradox, isn't it? It really is. And for what I would say, and we can all just speak from our own experience, really, but it seems like what's quite typical and certainly happened for me is, first, there's the recognition where it would just, one of my early awakenings, well, there was a whole series of them before I met my first embodied teacher. And I just kept seeing beyond the limited self. But the day that I met my first embodied teacher, who was Eckhart Tolle, when I was sitting with him, and a lot had happened, I suppose, to prepare me for that. Um, there was just this expansion into the entire universal body. In other words, unlimited universal consciousness, no self, no body, nothing. And that opens, that stabilizes. And but from my viewpoint, that's only the first part. That's only the beginning. Whereas before that, I would have thought, oh, that's the end. That's all there is. You just go beyond. But we're here apparently in these physical forms, and the physical body is not what it appears to be. When we're still seeing it as a separate object, that's what we're saying. Yeah, we're not that. We don't discount it, or throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. But there's a deeper truth about what the body is. Its true nature is only consciousness. And when we see it as an object, there's still separation. We might see ourselves or know ourselves as one with the universe, with all life, but oftentimes there's still a sense of being separate from the body. So when we say at first, I'm not the body, that's great. We know that, but then it needs to come back until everything is included. Nothing is separate, not the body, not the emotions, not the thoughts. It comes to be known, true non-duality. There is only that appearing as the collection of energy we call the body, that appearing as an emotion, a sensation, a thought. And that's where there seems to be the process that takes time and ever deepens. I can say more about that if you like, but it's really surprising. But it's where the true nature of the body and self, it's all one. The body's no longer a separate object.
Yeah. And also, when you feel like that, what do you feel like your life is completely different than from before you realized yourself, like the wholeness?
Yeah, and that's again, that's something that, we look and we can see in retrospect, that, it's still that's still shifting, integrating, but there is in those early awakenings, yes, it's an utterly transformed sense of self, of embodiment of life, of who you are, and it's like who you were before. It's almost like it's a past life. You just don't relate to it. It's not you anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And you have a different worldview, and it keeps deepening. And so, for most of us, when we have that within, let's say, our own experience, then it's about bringing that into every situation, relationship, family dynamics, so that that also is known and realized in those contexts as well. And then you really see, wow, it's so different here. The viewpoint is very different.
Yeah, because you always hear about that the world becomes so alive and the colors become more colorful, and maybe it is because one is fully there, fully available, fully alive through the body, I guess.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Yes, absolutely. I can remember in the early days when I was having those early awakenings and when I came to Eckhart's teaching, his teaching of presence. Yes, you are, see, the whole thing is, as you know, is for before awakening, we are really almost exclusively occupied in the mental space. And the mind, it's like this screen of static interpretation, judgment, and we're operating through that. So it's like a screen between us and reality. So, yes, as we become present slash awakened, it's true. I mean, every tree you feel there's this love, this connection, all the colors. And because when you're more present, there's less mental activity, there's no barrier between you and life and nature, and everything is more beautiful and alive. That and that is, uh, we could say, a permanent shift. And that even that keeps maturing and deepening. It's just extraordinary. It's wonderful. Yes.
And you have actually no idea what's going on either, because in the deepening of that kind of happening moment by moment, you don't know what's going on, right? It's like you live in kind of an adventure, I guess. Like it's the unknown.
Yes, the great Krishnamurti sort of talked about the opposite of that. The before awakening, the state is, he called it the prison of the known. It's mind based, and then yes, presence. You absolutely love the way you said that. It is to live in the unknown, and it's true. You don't know anything except what arises in the moment. Yes, and what arises in the moment, it's so great because our true nature, consciousness, is unbounded and universal, which means it's everyone. So when we're in a space with anyone or anything, it's always what arises is factoring in the totality. It's always for the good of everyone. And so when we go in with a preconception or a plan, there's a place for that. But generally, in presence, in being and living this way, there is no plan. You just arrive. And the totality, you become more and more transparent to the transcendent. And that operates through both, but it's always in service to all. And there's less and less a sense of, what can I get out of this, or what's this going to do for me? It's always just this mystery. And like you said, it is an adventure. It's so amazing. You just never know what's going to happen next. And even when, because this can still happen, even when something happens that seems it's not this miraculous, joyful, on the surface, it might seem some sort of problem appears. you start to, you just know really from this perspective, it gets more and more obvious, even that is somehow serving liberation, deeper embodiment. So you start to cooperate more with what's going on. And it's just continually taking you into more stabilization, unshakability of this greater truth.
So it sounds like there's no resistance if you let things happen, and even all the so-called bad things that happen, or bad emotions, or the things we don't like, or if we don't resist that, it's something happens in that, maybe, or maybe not, but it's like you live in as a life with no resistance, it sounds like.
I wouldn't, I know what you're pointing to. And I think if we'd had this conversation some time ago, I would have agreed with that. But what I would say now is yes, there still can be resistance. Resistance is natural. For me, it's more and more just like nature. Um, there can be a movement in the body that we would call resistance. Now, the truth is though, what you're pointing to, and that yes, it's, you don't label it resistance anymore. You just recognize, oh, there's something arising in the embodiment. And rather than think of it as resistance, you immediately make space for it, come into agreement with it, allow it to rise, because even so-called resistance, I mean, there's only consciousness. What else could it be? So as you let it come up, it will serve some sort of function. It has wisdom in it. And so when we call it resistance, then we're making a separation instead of we just, oh, here's some kind of energy. And really, what I have found the most helpful and powerful that makes the biggest difference is to work with everything at the level of energy rather than thought or emotion or story, right? If you keep reducing it down to its energetic form, what we might have called resistance, it's just an energy.
Yeah.
And it's consciousness in a very interesting form. When you know that, you automatically make space for it, and thereby, really, what you're saying is true in that sense that you allow that energy to be there, and then it's no longer resistance. It's just an energy. And I have found over and over, it's serving a function, and it can actually help us become more rooted if we work with it.
Yeah, so kind of let whatever happens, let it happen, or because it's going to happen anyway. It's kind of like, and even if there is also some feelings and resistance with what is happening, let that resistance be there. And if there's no resistance, then there's no, it's almost like whatever happens is fine. Whatever happens is just happening. And I guess if you're in peace with that, then I can see how you're free, because nothing can pull you out of peace. If you are in peace with just being with what happens, then there's so much freedom in that. You're not scared and fearing, oh no, what if this happens? Because you're already in peace with it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful because that is the state we're talking about. It's not really a state, but our true nature is peace. We're starting from peace. There's peace. It's abiding. It never leaves. It's just I was sort of pointing more to those moments when there seems to be an obscuration or something that seems to, and everyone, in the over 20 years I've been sharing this truth with people, I've heard it from virtually everyone. There's moments when you feel you're not centered in that peace. It's not true. It's just a perception. So I'm really pointing to more of when something arises that seems to obscure it, you work with that. And it's true. It's because and you're centered in peace and you can't lose anything. There's nothing at stake. And it's just you're cooperating with the movements of nature that may come through. Just like in nature, there can be a sudden gust of wind. Well, there can be a sudden movement of emotion. Perhaps one has lost a loved one and there's a movement of grief, but it's not an obstacle to peace. It's happening within the field of peace. And as we work with those movements, we actually come to what you're talking about is present. It cannot be disturbed. It doesn't come and go. Everything else comes and goes, but not the peace of our true nature. And we're in a time of intensity now on planet Earth. So, there is there does seem to be a lot more movement of the underlying stuff that hasn't yet been come up, hasn't yet risen to the surface to be integrated or released. So it's sort of why I'm bringing that in a little bit here today, because we are an infinite field of freedom and peace, and we have space to accommodate anything that arises. And when we let it come up, as you say, it just moves through and fulfills its function.
Yeah, it's often like the fear of the fear, right? Like, oh no, what is this? And but like I like to say, thoughts and emotions, they don't have arms and legs, right? We are so scared of them, and it's like, no.
I love that.
Yeah, because they're actually quite powerless. Why do we give them so much power? And they're there, and that's fine, and let them be there and let them come and go, right? It's
Yes, but you just brought up one of the most important things that there is that I've discovered on this path is the recognition. You see, usually even after, well, really after awakening, the real work begins. And that is where you take this so that it, as you say, it becomes your abiding state, and then anything that can move through it. But what you just said, one of the most profound realizations I had was after seeing through the sense of a separate self. And it was a clear, seeing clearer than ever before. What you just said, we are the ones that are empowering anything that is troublesome to us. And once we see that, we cut the energy source to those things. And then, yes, they come to rest but it's a profound recognition to see that though. And once if there's blind spots or conditioning running in a given moment, someone may not recognize that. It seems like it's an outer situation or something's happening to me. So this deepening is where we recognize, oh, everything is us and it's our own creation. And when we see that, then that's the end of it. It's Krishnamurti said it this way in terms of, bringing something to rest or healing it or resolving it. And you pointed to this earlier. It's not an action. He said the seeing is the action. Once it's seen, that's it. Consciousness has come into this perhaps blind spot or pocket of trauma energy, and it unravels naturally. So just to be seeing, it is an effortless process that continues to unfold because we are all powerful and everything is us. It's only when we separate from, and we're doing that ourselves. And as we come to get more grounded as consciousness in our embodiment, we merge with it all. And that is a profound shift in itself.
yeah. And I guess also that awareness, that awakened awareness, um, it can hold whatever comes up, and everything is seen that way. Whereas if we are just in the mind and the story of us, and it's like we're cut off, right? We just see this, and but if we don't have that mind story and just completely lost in what our beliefs and ideas and concepts and thoughts and the story, if we kind of let go of that, then you have that awareness that's just available, and then it's like, oh yeah, all these things can be seen.
Yes, beautifully said. I love that. Yes, yes, yes. And because when we're in the mind, as you know, we create a sense of being a separate self. And it's not actually real. It's literally a self-image, as they say in psychology. It's this collection of thoughts. There's no substance to it. But because we take it as real, we become this very limited, as you say, very limited, finite self. It's not true, but becomes our experience. That has no capacity, no power, can't change anything because it's not real. And so the dissolution of that sense, it's not real. It's not an actual separate self. There never was one. We don't have to get rid of a separate self. There isn't one. But when we relax out of the sense of, which is largely mind-based, but it's also very much in the body of being a separate someone, when that relaxes, all that remains is that infinite capacity that, yes, can and does hold and welcome everything. Yes. And it's beautiful and amazing. And it's a very embodied experience of awareness. It's not up there in the cosmos, it's right here. And as you say, it that's what we are, and we are larger than anything that can arise. And naturally, true nature always is welcoming, making space for, including. It's undivided. It doesn't separate from anything. The body, emotions, sensations, events. It's true, true, true unity consciousness.
Yeah, it's like open space that's just welcoming everything or allowing everything to happen. And
Yes.
yeah. And then I guess also when you're with other people, you allow all that, whatever they are, you allow that to happen. You may not agree upon certain things, or you may, sometimes it's difficult to be around certain people for us, or whatever buttons we have, they push them and so on. But it's, if you're in that allowing space that you actually are, then that kind of, I guess that opens up a space between you that otherwise wouldn't be there. Like some connection or love can flourish between people when you're that open space too.
Beautifully said. And, a very simple way to say that is, and this is also true of kind of the spiritual unfoldment, awakening, embodiment. So the first part, awakening, and not just this limited form. Embodiment is where we make the shift from the head to the heart. That's another way to say what you just said. And then from the heart, that heart is the ocean, the infinite ocean of our being is really, that's what the heart opens into. And when we know ourselves to be love, presence, unseparated unity, we bring that knowing to others. And what you brought up, I think, is really important, because that's what I was sort of hinting at earlier, is that then even knowing this, you can enter a situation where, especially family of origin, intimate relationships, children,
Mm.
these ancestral patternings, conditioned patternings will trigger each other. And to stay open rather than contracting, even if, because the thing is, again, the body may experience a contraction, a tightening, a reactivity, but if we remain, which happens increasingly as the awakening deepens, we remain as this openness. You could call it love. It's oneness. And we make space for any reaction in us and them. And even if the other person isn't conscious of it, you're meeting them. When you meet heart to heart, that's the field of oneness. And it makes space for them. And I've seen really big changes without doing anything or saying anything in all the relationships with my family of origin. They've all changed. I haven't done a thing except to be this space, make space for anything in me, and also what arises in them, which is just the appearance of separate beings. Yeah, it's profound. It's peace, it's harmony. It's always here, despite appearances. The other thing is, it's you start to see that when you're, let's say, just as a way of expressing it, when you're looking as or from awareness or presence, when you know that here, you, in a sense, look through the appearance of the other person, because that's a temporary appearance. Senses pick up. It's not who they are any more than it's who we are. Ultimately, you look through that and connect being to being. And that, without knowing it, people love that. It's like it's like a transmission or an invitation. They can come into even a little bit of entrainment with that truth about who they are. It's why people so much love to be with spiritual teachers often. Some of the great gurus, stories of, because they are looking into and meeting the person at their ever present place or reality of peace and freedom. And it starts to awaken. Can't do that because that would be a sense of being a separate someone or doer. It just happens, and it transforms relationships for sure.
Yeah. So it sounds like also to me that it's a lot about relaxing, like relax. And that way you open up a lot. Just relax your mind stream or relax your beliefs. Like just kind of see things come and go, relax your grasping onto them or believing in them or attached to them. So can you talk about that? Like relaxation, it's almost like, okay, I don't need to do anything but relax.
That is the deepest truth, my friend. That's it right there. And so I really like that. And so when we are still thinking we're a separate self and that mind based identity is in place, that is a state of really pretty much 24-hour tension because it's not real and it has to be sustained and maintained subconsciously. We're forever reinforcing our sense of self. And then, even as that is seen through, there's still, and like the example you gave, there can still be, then largely for most people, there still is the I'll say the echo or residue of separation in the body, and that results in what we call contraction, tension, tightness. So rather, I mean, for a long time, I tried to relax out of the sense of separation in the body. Well, like, duh, there's the effort then. Who's doing that? But it is exactly what you said. It's as you relax with or make space for, it's almost like the body learned to contract and tighten, and you're helping it remember to relax. And the only way to really do that effectively and really without time is to be the relaxed open being that you are right now. It's like, this is just a way to describe it. I'm not saying this is accurate, but it's almost like you as relaxed being, which is your natural state. When you remember that relax in your being, in your spaciousness, it transmits a signal almost to the body mind. Oh no, when it starts to tighten or contract or resist, that kind of energy, as you relax with it, the body remembers, oh, oh, yes, right. It remembers its true nature as restful, open being. And it's more like an invitation than a forcing. You invite the body, and it does. It starts to relax and remember and release the tensions. And then there's less and less and less of that contraction or tension or reactivity that happens. So it is, you could say in a nutshell, it's really about relaxation for sure. I agree with that. And it also points to that that really has to include the body, because a lot of people are really conscious and have that head awakening, but still experience a lot of contraction in the body. And so it's important to bring that relaxation to the whole embodiment as well.
Yeah. And also, yeah, relaxing the thoughts we believe so much in. And because it really seems like the thoughts have so much power. I know thoughts and emotions kind of like a loop, and then they escalate, and suddenly you're like, whoa, way out in an illusion that's not even happening. All that's happening is right here, right now, right?
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, with that, it's it's a really important thing to talk about. And I did a practice for a number of years when I first came to Eckhart's teaching and practicing presence. And at the very beginning, I got into a war with my mind trying to stop the thoughts. And of course, it just comes to me to say, I mean, all that does is empower them, because you're sending that energy of resistance and it's reinforcing the sense that you're a separate self that can stop the mind. So there again, the way to truly relax the mind is not through effort, but to help open space in the mind. And there's quite a few things that you can do gently. And so one is inquiry. And one of the ones I really like is you pause and you ask inside, who am I when I'm not thinking? And
Mm.
you just pause, and all of a sudden, thoughts stop without any effort. And boom, there's a space. And so any kind of profound inquiry like that, it opens the space and helps to have consciousness see. It's almost like opens a window where consciousness can see itself instead of being identified with the thoughts. So that's one another really important factor with this. And speaking from years of experience, again, that helps, that the other thing that helps the mind relax the most besides that inquiry is to come into the body. because our attention can't be in two places at once. And it's used to, we've been conditioned from the time we're born to put all of our attention in the thought space. And actually, if you just simply come out of the thought space and just come into your body, ground into your feet, your body, and your energy body, that felt sense of the reality of your being in this embodiment, that will automatically pull. It's like pulling your attention out of the mind, and attention is power. It's consciousness focused. So if it's in thought, it's feeding thought, like putting fuel in the tank of a vehicle. Instead, you gently come and rest in the body, and that also erodes the momentum in the mind and helps it relax. So there's a few really practical things like that that really help.
Yeah, and maybe that's the point of uh, like meditation, or it's just kind of to pull you out of the mind stream, or kind of get those little glimpses where, oh yeah, what am I when I'm not completely lost in my thoughts and story? But then there's this space, and then you can kind of keep pulling you back there, or uh, kind of become aware of that more and more. And then eventually you live from that space all the time, basically, right? But you can still react to things. You can still work. You can still function with your mind, and you can still think, right? It's not like you end up just being this um, completely thoughtless person, because it's not possible as a human.
Yeah, functioning happens, but the mind, I would say, takes on its proper place. One of my favorite teachers, Joel Goldsmith, he was a Christian mystic and had just a radical non-dual realization. And the way he put it is the mind is an avenue for awareness. There's a lot of ways to interpret that, but you could think of it as it receives the impulses from the intelligence and then can act on them. But it's rather than being mind driven or having the mind drive or having the mind be predominant, it's more almost like, an icon running on your desktop. It comes forward when it's needed. So if you're about to do your taxes, you'll use some mental faculties. But it's more that, yeah, consciousness, being, presence, stillness, whatever we call that, awareness, that is predominant. And that, because that is everything, it's not just the source. This is non-duality. It's that no thing, that awareness, that source is not only present in, but as all of creation. There's just supreme intelligence. So always when we're, like you said earlier, in the unknown, meaning not coming from a limited, familiar sense of knowing that's based on the past, when we're just open, the intelligence moves through us into action. In the Tao Te Ching, I think one of the great quotes is something like, can you remain unmoving until the right action arises by itself?
Wow, that's
And that's it. Isn't that beautiful?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then it just happens, and that's yeah.
And it's always so much more than what the little mind could have thought of. And, you start to see more and more and more as you live this way that one of my favorite things is when something comes out of the blue, it's something that you couldn't even have thought of as wonderful blessing or opportunity or whatever it is, meeting. And it's just the evidence that this is the orchestration of the totality of the intelligence, the oneness, the awareness that is everything. And the more relaxed we are, relaxed into being and being in presence and the unknowingness of the now, the more fully that can operate through us. It's a kind of a state of a relaxed beingness where everything happens. And then, as you say, there's just responding happens. It's natural.
Yeah, yeah. And that sounds like freedom too to me, because it's like, oh, I'm not the doer. I don't have this responsibility in the same way as if you think you're this person that has to save the world, or it kind of just happens that you are at the right place at the right time, or wherever you are, whatever you do is fine. It's not like it can be otherwise. Anyways, you just take action as it comes through you to take action, or not action, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's resting as your natural abiding state, and until movement happens, whether it's from within or without, there's really, you'll come to see there's no difference between those two. Those are, artificial distinctions, really. But yes, and what you just brought up is powerful, because a lot of people do get stuck there or have stumbling blocks, and that happened for me too, where you this false sense of self, there can be a residue of it. And for example, trying to end suffering or overcome something, and there can just be a background belief, some sort of I thought, I need to end my suffering, or I'm not there yet. And that can sort of trouble the waters, so to speak. And so in moments like that, you use inquiry, and you can see through the illusion, and just, it's not accurate to say return to, because we never left, but experientially return to the open space. So for example, that happened for me, and I didn't realize there was a background remaining belief, this is years and years ago, but that I am responsible for ending suffering, not just for myself, but for all beings. It was this big weight and responsibility. It was keeping in place a remaining thread of the separate self. And so one day I recognized that. So this is it. Consciousness, being pure intelligence, will keep bringing something right in our face, right to be presented until it's seen through. And we sometimes think of those as problems or what other people are doing. No, it isn't. It's all serving a deeper realization here. And when I inquired into that, I had a moment of something I would have called suffering, and largely that had fallen away. So when it came, it was rare and really got my attention. And one day I went, wow, there's a real knot here about this. And so I just inquired, like, what is behind this? And that's when that self-image came into full view and was seen through. There's that sense of I, it's just a collection of thoughts. I am responsible. I saw that every one of those thoughts started with I, and just recognized in that recognition, it just fell away. So this is what I mean by everything serves a deeper recognition and realization, which means embodiment of our true nature. And so there isn't anything to do. However, in the moment when we feel like a doer, when that arises, that can be welcomed. We don't have to make a big deal out of it, but that relaxes more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, like just welcome everything.
Basically, right? That's it. Yes. And the sense that the issue with that, though, is if someone listening right now or in a given moment feels like, okay, I'm a separate someone, how do I do that? That's starting down the wrong path to begin with. It isn't a doing, it's our natural state does welcome everything. That's what we are, is a field of welcoming, allowing, embracing spaciousness. You could call it love, you could call it compassion. So it's in the undoing of the sense of having to do anything. The relaxation out of trying allows us to return to that natural state where we are already welcoming everything. But to get real about it, I think pretty much everyone I've known, maybe a few exceptions, after awakening, these things can still happen. So it is helpful to speak about, yes, this can happen, and how do you meet it or deal with it? And it's, again, language makes it sound like I'm talking that there's someone there that can do something, but there is a reality of our beingness, and most things, there's things that still have momentum after awakening, they may still arise. And so to just know that, because oftentimes the thought will come up, I'm doing it wrong, or I had it, now I've lost it, just because there's a reaction arising or something. No, no, it's to understand. There's a deeper understanding that comes, but it's helpful to point it out. This is just remaining momentum, or a remaining echo of tensing and contracting in the body that reinforces a sense of self, or something that isn't fully met yet by our welcoming nature. It's just coming up so it can be met and included. And so everything is serving us returning to the realization and living experience that we are the all welcoming presence. Everything serves that. So just for people to know, it's not an obstacle or I have so much more work to do. No, everything is helping us live, remember, return to the reality of the all welcoming, spacious beingness of our true nature.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Karen. That was amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. I think it'd be very beneficial for people to hear all this. And do you have a website they can go to and maybe look at events or calls or whatever you have?
Yes, it's KarenMcPhee.com, KarenMcphee.com, and everything is linked from there. So I sit with people privately in different ways to help deepen the embodiment, support the awakening, and integration. I do offer classes. Everything is about this. It sometimes looks like it comes in a different form, but everything is supporting this. So I have regular classes, gatherings, a monthly free healing circle, and everything can be found on my website. People can sign up for my mailing list for some meditations, and there's a bunch of free meditations on my website as well.
Oh, great. That sounds wonderful. So thank you again, Karen. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was lovely to be with you, Susan. Bless you, and thank you for what you're offering people.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.